Hello dear students. In this lecture we are going to cover a topic that is called as measure of dispersion. Measure of dispersion. But before proceeding to this topic, briefly we will summarize what we have learned in our earlier lectures that I have posted on YouTube. Okay, so earlier lectures in this paper Computational Botany, we discuss about the basics of biostatistics. In that we discuss different types of terms which are used in biostatistics, like your sample, your population, then primary data, secondary data, qualitative data, quantitative data, different types of frequencies, then types of frequency tables, and like that different statistical terms that usually used in the statistics that we learned earlier in the first lecture. Then we discussed or we learned regarding a first concept in the biostatistics or a computational botany, that is a measure of central tendency. So what is measure of central tendency? It is a representative value. It is a representative value which represents the entire set of the observations. Means one value which is going to represent entire observations, entire set of observation, that value is called as measure of central tendency. In that we discussed or we learned three different types of measure of central tendency. First one is mean, second one is mode, and third one is median. Okay, so what is I will going to just sum it up in a very fast manner. What is mean? It is nothing but the arithmetic average. Okay, whatever the set of observation or number of observations that are given to you, we have to just take an average, and what comes, that will be the mean of that set of observations, or a data set, you can say data set. Okay, so that is about mean. Then second thing we discussed is the median. Okay, median is simply, it is the middle value of a observation. Middle value means if you have given the 10 set of observations or 10 observations, you have to just arrange them in a ascending order, then you have to find out the middle value, and that middle value will be your median. Then last one is your mode. So mode is what? Mode is simply, it is the most frequent value or most highly repetitive value of a distribution. So for example, if you have given a set of observations, around 8 observations you have given, and in that if a particular number, say for example 2, it occurs three times, and no other value occurs 3 times, other value maximum occurs 2 times, so that 2 will be your mode. Okay, so these measures of central tendency that represent a data set or a data observations that are given to you. But that today's concept, that is your measure of dispersion. Again, what we learned in earlier lecture, that measure of central tendency, that is not a complete measure or a complete value or a satisfactory value that will going to represent and that data set. Okay, so to make it precise, to bring the precision in data representation or data efficacy of the data, or what we are going to extract from the data, this concept of measure of dispersion is important from that perspective. How? See, here one example is given, you will be better understood by this example. I have given here 3 different types of data sets. First one is A data set, second is B, third one is C. Okay, so you have given around data sets which are having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 observations. How many observations? 5. Okay, 5 observations are there in each of these three data set A, B and C. Okay, I want to tell to you that central measure of central tendency that we learned previously, it may be sometime misleading or it will not completely represent that data, because that will be given in this example. For example, here three different types of data sets are there: 16, 16, 16, 16, 16. If we want to find out a mean for these three data set, if we are going to find the mean, okay, so how we are going to find the mean? We have to just sum up these observations. For example, 1 2 3 4 5, 16 into 5, or 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16 means 80. 80 upon 5, it again becomes 60. Okay, then this total, if we take 14 plus 15, 15 plus 16, 16 plus 17 plus 18, it again becomes 80. It again becomes 80 upon number of observations are 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, it becomes again 16. Then third, 8 plus 3, 11, 11 plus 17, 28, 28 plus 24, 38, 48 and 52, 52 plus, sorry, 8 plus 3, it becomes 11, 11 plus 17, 11 plus 17, it becomes the your 28, 28 plus 28 plus 24, 28 plus 24, it becomes 38, 48 and 52, 52, 62, 72 and so it has to be one number increase. So here we'll take 28. Okay, so here if we take the value of this, it becomes 80 plus divided by number of observation 1 2 3 4 5 means it becomes 16. If you see carefully here, the three different types of data sets, they are having same mean. They are having same mean. But if you observe closely, these three different data sets are different from each other. These three data sets are different from each other, because the values here they are only 16, here the values tend to vary, here also the values are different. So even if there are difference in each individual observation, their mean comes the same. So can we say that this is the representative value of all these three data set? So whether they are truly representing this value truly representing this data set? So obviously the answer becomes no. Why? Because even if they are having same mean, the data sets are different. Data sets are different from each other. So to tackle with this problem, the more advanced concept in statistics arise than this measure of central tendency, that is the measure of your dispersion. Measure of what? Measure of dispersion. So what is measure of dispersion here? So if we see the definition of measure of dispersion, it is like this. Measure of dispersion can be defined as the degree of scatter or variation. Okay, scatter or variation. The degree of scatter or variation of a variable around a central value. The degree of scatter or variation of a variable around a central value, or it can also be defined as the extent to which individual items vary. Okay, so let us take one example here. If I take a data set around 2, 4, again 8 and 10, there are 4 different observations are there. Okay, here And if you want to find out a dispersion, how the individual observations vary from a central value. First of all, you have to find out the central value. Central value means what? Average. 10 plus 8, 18, 18 plus 4, 22, 22 plus 2, 24. 24 by 4. It becomes 6. Okay, so that 6 is your central value. Central value. So here, now what is this dispersion is? See the definition. The measure, the degree of scatter or variation of a particular variable. These are variable. This is first variable, this is second, this is third, this is fourth. Okay, so degree of scatter or variation of a variable, these are 4 variables around a central value. Now here central value is what? 6. So how these variables differ or scatter from this 6? If you take here 6 in the central position, how these 2 scatter from the 6 by 4 units? How this 4 scatters from the 6 by 2 units? You are getting my point? Okay. So because simply we have to just do the subtraction. Okay. So how far from this 6 is the 2? By 4 units. Okay. Because 2 plus 4 is 6. How far this 4 from 6? Only by 2 units. Okay. How far this 8 from 6? Again it is by 2 units. How far this 10? It is again by 4 units. So this 4, 2, 2, 4, these are what? These are the degree of or dispersion. Okay. How the data is spread from its central value. Central value is your mean, and how the individual observation is scattered or it is spread from its central value is nothing but your measure of dispersion. Okay, so I hope you have understood the definition of measure of dispersion, how a data is spread from its central value, that we have to take into consideration. See, now what are the lacunas in the previously measure of central tendency? In central tendency, even if in mean, even if you take each and every observation into consideration, it may sometimes give the false impression. Okay, in case of mode and median, the condition becomes more worse, because these are only a positional averages. They do not take into consideration every observation. As we know that median is just simply a middle value. It doesn't take into account the extreme values or any other value. Okay. Same case with the mode. Mode is just highly repetitive value. It doesn't count every observations. But if you see the measure of dispersion, the measure of dispersion is taking into consideration every value. Okay, every value. So it is more precise way of data analysis and representation. Okay, so here how this dispersion is measured. There are different statistical parameters by which we can measure a dispersion. How? The first measure is your range. First measure is your range. So by studying the range, we can calculate a measure of dispersion, how the data is spread. Okay, that is a very preliminary method. Then second is your mean deviation. Second is your mean deviation. So third one is your standard deviation. It is very important from your exam point of view. Standard deviation, will have separate lecture on that. Standard deviation, then mean deviation, and last one is your variance. Okay, so standard deviation and variance, that will study in one lecture. So range, mean deviation, standard deviation and variance, these are the 4 methods by which we can measure a dispersion. Disperse means what? To spread. Okay, to disperse means to spread. So its dictionary meaning also suggesting the same thing. Okay, so these are the four different types of methods by which we can count the dispersion. Out of that, in this lecture we will study the first method, that is range. So that this range is a very simple method by which we can find out a dispersion of a data set, a dispersion of your observations. Okay, so what is range? Range can be defined like this: the range, the difference between highest value and lowest value is your range. Okay, the difference between highest value and lowest value of a variable in a distribution is your range. Okay, so range is given by the formula range equal in bracket short form it's R is equal to L minus S, where the L is your largest value and S is your smallest value. Let us take one example by which you can easily learn this. So here we'll take one example. We'll take one example by which you can calculate a range. Here I will take example. I will take example here. Okay. So see, if a data set is given like this 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay, so how many observations are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 observations. And if you observe this data set, you will find the highest value in this data set is your 25. Highest value is 25. Highest value is your 25, and the lowest value is highest value is 25 and lowest value is your 5. Okay, so by formula, if we put the value in the formula, very simple is there. Range is L minus S, which is equal to L is what? Your largest value or highest value is your 25 minus S means what? Your smallest value, that is 5. So range becomes 25 minus 5 means it becomes 20. So for a given set of observation or for a given set of data, the range is 20. The range is 20. Okay, so it is giving you how the data is spread. Okay, overall. Okay, how this data, even though it doesn't take into consideration the intermediate variables, these variables are not taken into consideration. Therefore, it is very preliminary method of measuring the dispersion. It is not that much sophisticated method. It is a very preliminary method by which we can calculate the measure of dispersion. Okay, so it is the formula given to you. Then second is coefficient of range. So what is the coefficient of range? Coefficient of range is the relative measure of range. Okay, here ratio comes, therefore it becomes relative measure. Okay, relative measure. So it is a relative measure of range and it is given by the formula L minus S upon L plus S. So if you take a same data set and for which we have to calculate the coefficient of range, so what is L there? L is your largest value 25 minus 5 upon 25 plus 5, it becomes 20 upon 30. 20 upon 25 minus 5, L is your largest, 25 minus 5 and upon 20. Okay, it is correct, 20 upon 30, it becomes around 0.66. So it is your coefficient of range. Okay, so range, if we see the merits and demerits of range, range is very easy to calculate. It is very preliminary measure, but it is not used. One of the disadvantage of this range is it is not used so much in statistics because it gives you only a preliminary idea. So in this lecture we have seen the measure of dispersion as an advanced statistical feature, advanced statistical measure, because the inadequacy of measure of central tendency to represent correctly a given data set. The more advanced measure, there is a requirement of more advanced method which can take every value into consideration, and for that measure of dispersion is given. Then if we see the definition of measure of dispersion, it is simply the degree of scatter or variation, or you can say spread of a variable around a central value that we learned by taking the example, or the extent to which an individual atoms vary from the central value. Okay, then we discussed, we studied the different methods of measuring the dispersion. In that we are going to study this. We only study range today. So that range, mean deviation, standard deviation, and last one is variance. So range, if we see the difference between highest and lowest value of a variable in a distribution, it can be calculated like this: R is equal to L minus S, and coefficient of variation, coefficient of range is given by L minus S upon L plus S, by which I can we can calculate the coefficient of range. Okay, so I hope you have understood this topic. If you have any query, any doubts, in first slide of a video you have been provided with my mobile number. I have given email ID also. WhatsApp number is there which starts from 82. Okay, so this WhatsApp number is given. If any sort of query regarding, if you don't understand the concept, you can directly ask me. I will, in next lecture I will share some of the exercise, some of the examples for you, so that you can solve it and submit it to me. Till then, thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.